Hi, my name is Will Gadea. I'm the creative director and founder of IdeaRocket. And today we're going to talk about walk cycles. I'm going to take you through a step-by-step tutorial on how to make a character walk. Now, when we think about the walk cycle, in some senses, it's one of the most basic things you can do in animation, right? But in another sense, it's quite challenging too, because there are dozens of muscles working in the body and they're counterbalancing each other in the walk cycle. There's a sort of a coiled spring kind of quality about the torso. So it's a challenging exercise, but if you are gentle with yourself and if you're patient with yourself and you stick with it, you'll get better and better. Now, we're going to start with the most general kind of walk cycle imaginable. I call it the vanilla walk cycle. It's just a basic description of what the body usually does. But of course, character animation is about character. And I'm going to have some suggestions at the end for how you can spice this up, for how you can find the variations of the walk cycle and really explore the potentiality of this kind of movement. So we're going to be working on After Effects just because it's a very commonly used software, and most people have it. We're going to post that on the website, as I said. But if you want to follow along using another technique, if you're a traditional animator and you're working on Toon Boom, you can still do it on Toon Boom. And if you're a 3D animator and you're working on Maya or Blender or Cinema 4D or any of those softwares, you can download a rig from online and start working with it too. In fact, you'll be able to do some things that we can't hear because it's a sort of a flat puppet kind of style that we're doing in After Effects. But either way, whichever path you choose, you'll be able to have an opportunity to start exploring this kind of movement and how animators have broken it down for us to understand. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to do the walk cycle now, and we have got a project in After Effects that you can follow along with. You can download it from the site. I have created this project with no source files whatsoever. So as you can see, I've created this guy from mats on solids, and it's all rigged up, and everything is running off some expression controls on the null object. There you see all the solids. I've got them on shy layers there. There's a ground line there as a reference. Don't forget to turn that off when we start compositing though. So the only thing you need to touch is the null object that is labeled walking man. And as you can see, you can affect all the controls with the angle variable. And the only other thing other than the character controls is going to be the position, because in the walk cycle the man goes up, goes down. It's a sort of a zigzaggy kind of, or a sort of a wavy motion as he walks. So let's go straight to frame one, and we are going to make our first pose, which is the heel to toe pose. And it's very important. If you see a walk cycle and it doesn't look exactly right, chances are it's probably because it doesn't have a very good heel to toe position. This is the point in the walk where you're nearly flying through the air and you've just got very little contact with the ground. In this case, the heel of the right leg, the forward leg, is just touching the ground, and the toe of the back leg is just touching the ground. The front leg should be completely straight. The back leg is just slightly bent, and when the right leg is forward, the right arm is back, and when the left leg is back, the left arm is forward. I like to put a little bit of a bend at the elbow of the forward hand. and then straighten it in the backhand, just so that the arm doesn't look completely stiff, right? It's going to be just bending very slightly with the arm swing. Okay, so we should have a keyframe on all the character controls. This is just something I do. It's a little obsessive, but I just hate to go to a new scene and change a keyframe and then have that change a pose that I've created somewhere else. So just to be absolutely sure, I create a keyframe at each major pose I create, and that keeps each pose impregnable from change by any other pose. I'm sure you will come up with your own ways of working, though. There are other ways of working. So we've copied the first frame onto frame 25, and now we're going to create the heel to toe on the middle frame, frame 13. And while frame 1 and frame 25 are exactly the same, they're just a copy of the same keyframes, frame 13 is going to be the exact opposite. While before the right leg was forward, now the right leg is back, and the left leg is forward, and the right arm that was forward before is now back, and I'll let me get to that when I get to it. But basically, we are just reversing the pose that we had before, and that's going to create, as you will see, a sort of a Nordic track feel once we start running through these keyframes. Yeah, I'm kind of using the previous position of the arm to kind of determine the new position here. You could put a little bit of swing in the wrist, but I think that's a detail that you can add later if you want. Now we're going to go to frame 7, and we're going to create the first passing pose. I call this the passing pose because the leg that had been back is now going to pass by the forward leg that is now planted on the ground. So the legs are straight up and down. I'm zeroing them out. The interpolation of the arms is going to do all your work. You don't need to touch the arms right now. They're where they should be. And you're going to raise the whole rig with the position on the null object until he is standing with his right foot flat on the ground. And now you're going to actually have that foot passing, and the left knee is going to be slightly forward. The left foot is going to be at a sort of a 45-degree angle to the ground. And that is pretty much the passing pose for the left leg passing the right leg. Next, I think what I'm going to do is just create a keyframe in all my controls, and I'm going to now go forward to the next passing pose, which is going to be on frame 19. And again, it's the same thing. It's going to be a matter of zeroing out the legs so that they're straight up and down. Then we're going to raise the rig a little bit so that he is now has his left foot. That's right. Left foot is going to be flat on the ground, and now it's going to be the right foot that's going to be passing the left foot. So let's see if we can push the right knee forward a little bit, and then bring the calf back. Look for that nice 45-degree or so angle to the ground. And another detail that some people get wrong, sometimes the foot is passing too high. It's really just gliding over the ground. It's pretty low to the ground at that stage. I'm going to create my keyframes for all the variables. And now it's getting a little closer, right? We still need to do a few more poses, but we're getting closer. Now we're going to go to frame 4, and this is going to be the landing pose. After you have done the heel to toe, you're going to be landing on that front foot, the right foot in this case. And all the weight is kind of falling onto that foot. And here, this is kind of a bit of a counterintuitive pose, because people usually don't realize that the leg, the sole of the foot really, is nearly perpendicular to the ground at this stage. And oftentimes, the people have the foot too flat, and that is not accurate, and it doesn't really look right. So make sure you've got that sole facing nearly completely backwards. Again, the arms you don't really need to worry about. The interpolation is going to take care of them. And just make sure you've got him sinking down there to a lower pose so that he can be landing from the heel to toe. And now we're going to do the landing for the other foot. Now it's going to be the weight falling on the left foot. And we're going to bend at the knee, have that foot flat on the floor, and it's going to be the right knee that's going to be bent and nearly facing backwards there. That's good. And lower him a little bit so he is flush with the ground. Great. Let's get all the other keyframes here. And now the next pose we need to worry about is going to be at frame 10, and it's going to be the push-off. This is the frame, this is the pose where the character is actually the highest in the whole sweep of the pose, because he is actually kind of standing on his toe a little bit, and that's elevating him quite a bit. So the right knee is forward, and the left knee is forward, and the right foot is pushing off a little bit there. And that looks good. Let's just get all the keyframes clicked here. And I just have one more pose to do, and that is the push off for the other leg. Now it's going to be the left leg pushing off, and the right knee is going to be forward. So let's get that slight bend on the left toe, and let's get that left heel picked up. And let's raise him like that. Good. Knee could be a little bit higher, and the leg is just taking off from there. That looks good. Okay, so let's take a look at what that looks like here. That's not too bad, but it looks a little bit sharp still. It could be a little bit smoother. So what I'd like to do here is just go to the extreme positions, which is the heel to toes. What I'm going to do is go to keyframe assistant, easy ease. And what that's going to do is slow the movement into that pose and slow the movement out of that pose. So it's going to kind of soften it. So the movement doesn't stop abruptly there, but kind of eases into it and eases out of it. And that is pretty good. However, I think this pose here, I think the two pushing off poses are a bit radical. They're a bit too extreme. I think if he's pushing off a little bit less, it's going to look a little bit smoother. So you're probably not going to get it perfect the first time. So I'm glad I have the opportunity to show you how to improve just based on your eye. Just look at what you've done and see where the glitches are and how you can improve it. And what I'm going to do is just kind of lower him a little bit so that the left knee isn't so high up and the right heel isn't so high up either, so that he's a little bit closer to the ground and the pose doesn't feel quite as extreme. There we go. And let's go over to the other push off and we'll do the same thing. We'll just kind of lower the right knee and lower the degree of push off on the left toe. Okay, there we go. All right, I think that's a little bit better, don't you? It's just a little bit smoother and quite realistic. Okay, so that's the walk cycle, but once you've animated the walk cycle, you also have to composite it onto the scene. So that's what we're going to work on now. Before we start compositing the walk cycle onto a scene, I just wanted to talk briefly about some details of the walk cycle that we weren't able to work on in this file because we're working on a 2D puppet style technique. And that's the movement on the y-axis of rotation of the torso. In the walk, when the right hand is forward, the shoulder is going to go forward. And at that point, the left leg is going to be forward and the left hip is kind of rotated in that same direction, right? So the torso has this sort of quality where, you know, it turns this direction and that direction. It's kind of like a spiral kind of a motion. And you can learn more about it, get some more specifics on our site. I'll put a URL down here. But in the meantime, let's just move forward and work on some compositing. Okay, so we've created our walk cycle, but we still need to composite it onto the scene, and that's what we're going to do now. I've created a scene called Scene for Compositing, and it's basically a very simple scene made with some solids. I'm going to drag in the walking man rig, and you see him right there. If you have the ground line on in the walking man rig, you're going to need to turn it off. We're going to shrink him, not that direction, the other direction. We're going to shrink him to, oh, I don't know, about that size. Looks fine. There we go. And we're going to take him, we're going to take him over to the left side. So he's got a place to walk to. And then what I'm going to do so that he doesn't look like he's sliding when he's on the scene is I'm going to create a null object and put it right underneath his right foot heel. Let's go a little tighter there, and I'm just going to put that there as a sort of a placeholder to let us know where the right heel is. And okay, let me, before we do this, get into moving him around. I'm going to enable time remapping. Remember, we created this as a 24 frame cycle, and as you can see there, that's working nicely still. And we're just going to go to frame 24, create a keyframe there, and the further keyframe there we're not going to need, so we're just going to get rid of that one. And we're going to copy all those frames, put them in front, and now we're going to get two cycles going one in front of the other, right? So let's let's lock down the null layer so it doesn't move on us. And let's start positioning the walking man on the scene as he's moving forward. There, I move forward, and as you can see, he has shifted back a little bit, so you have to slide him forward so that his foot is in the right place at the right time. I'm adjusting the height a little bit there. That was just an imperfection from my scene, from my cycle, and I have the capability to fix it, so why not fix it here in compositing? And just like that, or just kind of moving forward one frame, repositioning, moving forward one frame, repositioning, so that the right foot is staying put on the ground as he's walking. And then when I get to about this position, which is the first heel to toe, I'm going to need to unlock the null layer and slide it forward so that it can be a placeholder for the next series of movements, right? So there we go. Let's lock it up again so it doesn't slide on us. And again, we're adjusting the positioning of the character. Now look at the position keyframes on the screen there. This is why this is necessary, right? They go by big leaps, sometimes little leaps. You can't just create a position keyframe and interpolate between the first position and the last position. Unfortunately, that doesn't work for walk cycles. And sometimes in cheap animation, you see that kind of poor compositing. But if you just take the time to take care of each frame, it's a little bit more time consuming, but the effects are a lot more pleasing to the eye when you do it this way. And now I'm going to move forward, and there you go. So let's see how that is looking. There we go. So he's disappearing because I don't have the layer all the way, but that's basically your walk cycle. You're placing that walk cycle in front, and if you wanted to keep them going, you could just continue that process there. But I'll leave it at that, and that is compositing a walk cycle. Okay, I promised to offer you some more suggestions on how you can continue to explore the walk cycle. And I think it's important that you do, because what we've been talking about is what I call the vanilla walk cycle. It's the most general description of movement, of that particular movement. But character animation is about character. So you need to be looking for things that can give your characters more personality, more specificity. So how do you go about doing that? How do you go about training yourself to do that? Well, what I would suggest in terms of where to begin is to see what artists before us have done. And I would suggest going to some sources and looking at some tropes that animators have used before. Now, of course, there are tropes, but the advantage of them is that we have a blueprint for executing them, and that's for somebody that's learning how to animate very useful. So what I would suggest is starting out with the sneak. Right now, the sneak is a character that is trying to walk, but he's trying to walk very quietly. So how do you walk when you walk very quietly? You raise your arms, you raise your foot, and then you bring it down really gently. The short, gentle steps, and they've got this sort of up and down quality to emphasize that softness, that coming down gently. And you can see some references for that on our website. I'll post the URL below. Another possible thing to explore is the double bounce. Now, on our walk cycle, we had one high point and then a low point in each step. In the double bounce, you have two high points, and it has a sort of a very jaunty, happy-go-lucky kind of quality. So we'll post some references for that on our site too, and I'd suggest you explore that particular trope as well. But you can also go beyond tropes, right? You can go to references, life references. What is the difference between how a man walks and how a woman walks? Richard Williams is really interesting about this, and he talks about how the female walk is more even. And I think a good reference for this is if you go to a Marilyn Monroe movie, say Some Like It Hot, and just look at how she walks in that movie. And Marilyn Monroe is sort of a caricature of femininity, really. So she emphasizes it a lot more than what you'd see normally when you observe women. So what is the difference? I think it stems from the body. Men tend to have more narrow hips. Women tend to have wider hips. When you have wider hips, and you need to be getting your feet underneath your center of gravity, that makes your legs kind of go towards the center. And if you look at a catwalk, models on a catwalk, they're trying to emphasize their femininity, so they actually go beyond the center line, right? They're crossing the center line with their steps. But Marilyn Monroe is kind of angling her legs towards the middle. And what does that do? That means that your hips kind of have to roll a little bit to allow you to do that, right? So while in the walk we just did, you might be creating some turn on the axis, on the y-axis, If you wanted to really have a more of a sort of a Marilyn Monroe walk, you might be turning the hips on the x-axis and rolling them this way and that way, this way and that way. And that creates a sort of something that's a little bit more like that Marilyn Monroe walk. But of course, you know, you can go beyond the movies. You can take it to your whole life. Just keep your eyes open. If you see somebody walking down the street and there's something about their walk that seems kind of funny to you, something strange, peculiar, just try to define for yourself what it is that makes that walk different than other walks. If you keep on doing this, I think you'll start enriching your vocabulary in terms of how you can describe this movement in your animation. Another thing that I think helps is if you actually try them on your body. After you see somebody walking kind of strange, try to do it and see how it feels. One thing I've tried and surprised myself is if you're kind of exaggerating the turn of your shoulders and the turn of your waist, you just kind of start feeling so much more confident, so much more powerful. And you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't feel that unless you actually tried it. So for animators, I think it's always a good idea to not just be working in your mind's eye, but to try things in your body to see how they feel and trying to get the details of that movement. So I hope I've given you some ideas on how you can continue to explore the walk cycle and all its potential. Don't forget to like and follow, and all the best luck in exploring this.